program, and later this month the renowned American poet and wit Ogden Nash would have celebrated his 100th birthday. Now, in The Unknown Cachery of Ogden Nashery, Michael Rosen examines some of the gems of his unpublished work, which has been kept since his death in 40 shoeboxes by his daughter, Linnell Nash Smith.
I think one of the things as a child you really hate being asked when you find out you have somebody famous in your family is, oh, what is it like to be the daughter of Ogden Nash? I just cringe. And my sister, who is very, very smooth, would just look up and she would say, well, I really don't know. I've never been anybody else's daughter.
Ogden Nash, born in August 1902, was a poet who appealed to people who wouldn't necessarily call themselves poetry lovers. He was a unique observer of the human condition, and his genius lay in making us laugh while communicating often uncomfortable truths. His pills were always sugared. Not only did he produce collections of poetry, all his life he wrote for the New Yorker magazine, and he had a passion for showbiz, having some success as a lyricist for Broadway musicals. He died in 1971, but in this, his centenary year, and with his daughter, Linnell Nash Smith, in 4300 Rugby Road, Baltimore, the family home when Linnell was growing up. We're on the first floor landing, looking over the banisters, down to the front door, and a spacious entrance hall with doors opening from it to a dining room, drawing room, and study. This was the spot Linnell and her sister Isabel chose in the 1930s to spy on their parents' many visitors.
Actually, we'd get down on our stomachs and peer through and see who was there and what sort of clothes they were wearing.
So what kind of people were coming?
Well, just dinner guests in general, and then, of course, when there was any kind of musical, people from New York who were involved with the theater would come, and that was especially fun.
Yes, well, people like S.J. Perelman?
Oh, yes, Sid Perelman and Mary Martin and Kurt Weill.
Oh, wow.
But occasionally the other thing they did was to have some of these performers in to try and raise money for shows. I think the people were called angels.
Oh, yes, we have that.
And sometimes it was successful and sometimes it wasn't. But it was a very hard thing for my father to do because he was very shy. And the thought of asking anyone for money was very hard for him to do. When he was doing it in New York, it was easier because he didn't know the people, but when they did it in Baltimore, it was hard.
Yeah.
And this is the dining room where we had our meals. My grandparents and Isabel and I and my father and mother would all have our meals together. And this is where we always played games at the dining room table. We'd play Who Am I? And we'd play spelling games and geography games and history games. And we learned a great deal.
He was quite a demon about pronunciation and grammar.
Yeah. Constantly the word like meaning as. Oh, boy, you don't mean that. Winston's taste good like a cigarette should. No. No.
Do you have a sense that he was listening out for language all the time?
Oh, yeah, he loved it. It was his great love. Because also he did speak Latin fluently. And a little Greek, German, French. I think the sound of words and the meaning was very important to him.
How come he would have been so good at Latin?
Oh, it was his mother. Grandmother was a real classic scholar. And my father, when he was a young boy, had an eye disease. I've never figured out exactly what it was, but he had to spend a year in the dark. And my grandmother taught him. And she taught him these languages. She taught him classic myths. She read all sorts of romance. I mean, it's where he got his real love of learning. And he always said that that was the place he got his greatest education, was from his mother. Well, he came down these little stairs.
All right.
And this was the study, and he would work in here when he was being formal about working, but to be honest, that wasn't very often. He mostly wrote on little pieces of paper all around the house.
You like to kind of drift in where the fun was happening.
Yeah, exactly. And he could sort of just put down little things. I think what he did was he had all those little bits and pieces of paper that he pulled together in here, maybe.
Yes.
I don't think he actually wrote the finished product sitting in the living room with all of us around him, but I think he was jotting down and thinking, and then in here it came.
Yes. And as a girl, did you sneak in here and annoy your dad when, you know, he wanted to be quiet? Were you one of those?
Not really, because he never really acted annoyed.
Oh, really?
No, I mean, I didn't know he was working. I mean, nobody said, be quiet, your father's working, or hush, children, I'm working.
And he didn't say, quiet, I'm writing.
No, I didn't know he did anything important. I mean, this is work? He's sitting doodling? Yeah. I don't think so. Yeah. But, no, I mean, that was why it was such a shock when One Touch of Venus came out, to find out that people knew about him. I just thought he was Daddy.
It's 50 years since the Nashes left the family home in Rugby Road. In the 1960s, Ogden Nash, needing the cash, sold his archive to the University of Texas. And that would be that. But for the fact that Linnell managed to hang on to a collection of memorabilia from those days. 40 shoeboxes full of letters, jottings, notebooks, unpublished manuscripts, and various bits of family bric-a-brac. I spent an afternoon with her exploring this treasure trove, the unknown Cachery of Ogden Nashery. First, a huge collection of postcards.
He went on lecture trips quite a bit because poetry did not always pay the bills, and the lecture circuit was a help. And here was one that he sent to me from Rockford, Illinois. Here I sit in Rockford, Ill, my elbows on the windowsill, watching traffic, even in Rockford, moving 1 foot forward and 2 feet backward. Love, Daddy. And then he wrote to Isabel, my sister, as to Venice is the gritty, the muleback is to Kansas City. So I should be more enthusiastic, but I'm not. Scoozy.
That's lovely, isn't it? The rhyme there of the enthusi with scoozy, isn't it? Yes. Oh, here's one to Isabel again.
Oh, okay. Here's another from Des Moines. And it's, I test my bath before I sit to keep my stern from tingling. Then the moment I lollop into it, the telephone starts jingling.
True enough. And there's one for you.
Oh, okay.
Also still in Des Moines.
This is also from Des Moines. I talked on the local radio, but no one ever mentioned dough. Somewhere I'll find a stack of coin, but not, I fancy, in Des Moines.
Yes, appearing on the radio with no fee.
Yeah, right.
Yes,
exactly.
I wouldn't know anything at all about that. Now, there's one I saw. Yeah.
Here's one from New Orleans. Only in this particular poem, he says New Orleans. If this weather continues, New Orleans will be eating codfish cakes and beans. I will not heed the mayor's excuse. It's just like Boston, Massachusetts.
Now, that's an incredible rhyme. Excuse
Yes.
it with Massachusetts.
Yeah, well,
you know.
that's Daddy.
Yeah.
And then on the shores of Lake Michigan, I cut into white fish again. It's simply delishigan.
Yes. Must have been lovely to get these cards.
It was wonderful. We really looked forward to the mail. You know, this was one I kind of liked because it has a little bit of the darker side that he had occasionally in his poetry. And it's from St. Louis. As American towns and cities I wander through, one landmark is constant everywhere I roam. The house that the banker built in 1902, dim neon tells me is now a funeral home.
It's like a kind of travel poetry, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And one of the things that I always thought would be fun to do would be sort of a book of that. You know, of Ogden Nash's America.
Oh, here's a nice thing. His little note scribbled on, first of all, there's a don't forget note.
Oh, yeah.
A don't forget little piece of paper. And I see, look, he's working on a rhyme there, visier and busier, which is quite nice. The world is too much with us. That's
the Times,
Wordsworth, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the Times...
And...
Oh, and the Times are out of joint? Oh, the
Yeah.
Times and are out of joint? exit pursued by a bear, with Mr. Crossbow, I missed the albatross. He's playing with all these bits of English literature here, isn't he?
Custer's
Last Stand, filibuster. I love some of thy rocks and rills. That's
Never was I born.
rocks and rills. Oh, I know what I said. Anyway, never was I born to set them right. Alas, now we're locked in together. Don't ask Mother, ask Granny. She understands you better. So he's playing with a whole set of things there.
Yeah.
Oh, here's a nice rhyme as well. Voluminous and leguminous.
Oh my gosh.
Yes. Sauce for the eager is sauce for the egress. He's always pushing at the edge of words and language, isn't he?
Better be quarreling than lonesome.
Irish
It's
proverb.
an Irish proverb.
But it's quite interesting that when he really, if you say something like that, you know, we saw a rhyme, excuse it's to rhyme with Massachusetts.
Yeah.
It's like you taking the language and like ringing it with your hands to make it fit your kind of humour and your fun, isn't it?
Yeah.
And here he is, you know, sauce for the eager is sauce for the egress. He's pushing it as hard as he can go, isn't he?
Right.
Yeah. He says here, bad poetry is pathetic, but much of it is funny, only usually not funny enough. I had brilliant idea, enhanced by lack of talent.
Yeah.
Bad poetry might turn out funny if written consciously instead of unconsciously. Also occurred to me, easier to write in verse than prose. Cow is large animal that contributes much to national larder. Nobody notices what you're saying. Verse, cow is of the bovine ilk, one end is moo, other milk.
There you go.
Editors buy it. This is wonderful.
There you go.
So there he is explaining the origins, if you like, of comic verse, isn't he? You say something in prose, nobody finds it funny at all. But you get that lovely wit that he gets there, and then everybody laughs. And
That's right.
And he discovered it. Yes. Okay, let's turn over more of these pages. This is wonderful. This is a parody of Herrick, the 17th century English poet. No more, when as in silks my Julia goes, the liquefaction of her clothes flows over synthetic pantyhose. Oh, that's great. Now, has that ever been in a book?
No.
Oh, that's wonderful. Emmeline, Evangeline and Trampoline. He's working on a little triolet. Constable, Dunstable and Unstable.
Yeah.
Ossifiers and Philosophies. It's wonderful, isn't it, seeing these little things, because part of his trick is to make the rhyme unexpected. Because if you think, you know, if you have expected rhyme, you don't laugh, but it's the sudden unexpectedness of the rhyme, isn't it? Oh, well, look at him working there. He's got
Secaucus, which is a place in New Jersey.
Carcass. Raucous, or raucous, I suppose.
Raucous, I guess.
Yes.
He didn't put the S on.
Focus, hocus pocus.
And cocos, what's that? Cocos.
It's great, isn't it? Because you can see the sort of fertility of it, can't you?
Right.
And then he says...
Crawfish, standoffish.
Oh, and he's having a bit of fun. Memory, go all tremory.
Yeah.
We have to remember he invents words to make the rhyme, a lovely grotesque twisting like tremory. So
This is Sid Perelman's number.
Oh, yes.
And that's the tax man's number.
Medicate and dedicate, he's got there. He should have written his own special rhyming dictionary. You could probably make a rhyming dictionary.
That would be fun, wouldn't it?
Yes, an Ogden Nash rhyming dictionary with all the ludicrous rhymes that he did.
Right.
Yes.
Have to lose weight to get on belt. Abracadaver.
Oh, yes. Abracadabra, yes.
Middle age is when people's stomachs protrude either above or below their belts, and everybody reminds them of somebody else.
Yeah, he's working on that, because that was some of his fruitful stuff, laughing at what you look like in middle age, what you can and can't do inside.
I remember the middle age one that I did. There are two that I like. One is the middle age begins. The middle is, when I remember bygone days, I think how evening follows morn. So many I loved were not yet dead. So many I love were not yet born.
That's lovely. Now, what have we got here?
Now, this is from, these are letters. That's from Sid Perelman.
Oh,
and this is from, oh, Lord, I think that's probably
Sid Perelman, that's
Sid
the,
also.
The Sid Perelman, that's the Marx Brothers scriptwriter.
Yes,
and,
yes.
So what was the relationship between your father and Sid Perelman?
My dad and Sid Perelman met in the prison of MGM out on the West Coast in the 30s. I think Mr. Mayer had the idea that anybody who wrote a bestseller belonged in movies or movie script writing. And so when my dad had a couple of best-selling poetry books with hard lines and freewheeling, he thought, we'll get that man out here. And my father went out, I guess it was in the summer of 1935, he and Mother, and then Isabel and I followed that winter. So that was how he and Sid got together, toiling in the stable at MGM. And it was a very difficult life for him. He hated it because he would be yanked off one thing and put on something else. And I think his description of one of the things he was writing, the storyline changed from being in Morocco to being in post-war Napoleonic France. I mean, you know, the whole thing would just change completely and you'd have to start all over. It was sort of like Sisyphus. You'd keep pushing this stuff up to the top of the hill and then all of a sudden, powers that be would shove it back down and you would have to go back and push it up the hill again. So he really, really was not cut out to be a Hollywood person. He kept trying, though. But Sid and Daddy maintained this friendship, moving from California to, well, Sid to Bucks County, Pennsylvania, and Daddy back to Baltimore. And they got involved in a musical comedy, One Touch of Venus. And so that was where they started really being into writing for the theater. They wrote together the book for One Touch of Venus. Kurt Weill wrote the music and Daddy wrote the lyrics. And it was a very successful musical. Had many hit songs, and of course he was hooked. So he was dying to go on and write another, and another, and another. And at one point, he was working on a possibility of a musical for Gone with the Wind. And the composer on that was Leroy Anderson, who was a very successful composer. And we still have a couple, well, actually a demo of the of two songs from that, which are, I think, quite good.
Then, out of one of the precious shoeboxes, this unknown Cachery of Ogden Nashery, Linnell produces the very disc, an old shellac demo disc from the 1940s, carefully protected by layers of cardboard. So, here, for the first time in public, Gone with the Wind, the musical. You're the first to hear it. Scarlett's song after her husband Charles's death and before she goes to Atlanta. Music by Leroy Anderson and lyrics by Ogden Nash.
I'm too young to be a widow. Widow's weeds are not for me. Why should I be broken-hearted? I was caged and now I'm free. That black material, so funereal, makes me want to scream, I declare. I won't falsify, I would falsify if I met the man who would dare. I don't want to be a widow. I was never Charles's wife, brooding over Charles's memory. I don't want to spend my life. I'll tiptoe warily, temporarily, mourning like a true turtle dove. I'm too young to be a widow, and I'm old enough for love.
So, with one of the near misses of Broadway musical history carefully stowed away, Linnell and I went on leafing through her shoebox archive. I came across an old photograph from the early 1940s with a poem written underneath.
Well, during the war, we were trying to raise money for war bonds, which helped finance, I guess, guns and planes and things like that, and the country in general. And so a lot of people who had name recognition in the States went sort of barnstorming from city to city, appearing, reading, or acting, or whatever it was they did, for money, which then went to the war bonds. And so Daddy did a lot of that, and he spent a great deal of time during World War II on the road, so to speak, trying to raise money for the country.
Now we're looking here at a picture that's really like a photo montage, isn't it? You've got a Mr. Worker, a kind of Joe Soap guy, and he's holding in his hands what looks to me like the rig that goes around a ship as the ship is being prepared, presumably a destroyer or a battleship, and he's holding it, but it is a montage because you can see through the photograph of the ship his arm, so it's rather in the tradition of the German artist John Hartfield.
Yes, and this is one of the typical kind of poems that he would have written to raise money. Here's a fellow you'd like to know, a citizen named Whittling Joe. Joe was whittling in a plant, whittling things the Axis can't. Whittling with his sharp machines, cargo ships and submarines. Whittling bombers, whittling tanks, whittling shells in shiny ranks. Shave a sliver off Benito, slice a slab off Hirohito. And Joseph really whets his whittler, whistling as he whittles Hitler. That's a job that Joe enjoys, whittling down the Axis boys. Whittling Joe is never through. He likes to whittle, with dollars, too. So every payday, Joe is fond of whittling Hitler with a bond. Multiplied by 50 million, Whittling Joe is some civilian.
Now that's in his handwriting.
Yeah.
Has that ever been published?
No. No.
That's extraordinary. And with this montage, which is really extraordinary.
I just love it.
Excellent. Throughout his life, Ogden Nash was associated with the New Yorker magazine. If you haven't ever read it, it offers a mix of humour, reviews, gossip, polemic, the kind of publication that Woody Allen probably loves to hate and hates that he loves. It was always Ogden Nash's first choice for publication of his poems. But at the beginning, his connection was more than that of a freelance contributor. In 1930, at a time when people like the great wit and poet Dorothy Parker were writing for it, Nash was poached from his job in publishing by the editor, Harold Ross, to take on a managerial role at the magazine, a role which Ogden found rather difficult to define.
He's writing Mother, who was on a trip abroad, January 31st, 1931. Darling Frances, you ask, and very prettily too, darling, if I know yet what I'm doing on the New Yorker. No, I don't, although I'm beginning to get a glimmer. Mostly, I listen to Ross's woes. Also, I try to get Dorothy Parker to write a piece for us every week. Also, every Saturday afternoon, I stay in the office till 6 or 7 arranging the talk of the town, those anecdotes, gossipy pieces, etc., up in the front, for the printer. My big job, I think, will be in the process of time to harness some of the waste power around the office. My impression at the moment is that there are far too many people doing far too little work. I may get so darned efficient in cutting down duplication of effort that I'll end up by eliminating my own job, which he did. He lasted 3 months there. This is from the 18th, another Dorothy Parker piece. Today's Parker episode. Her book page was due at 12. I called her up at 11 to ask her how it was coming. Oh, she said very sweetly, I've got a big surprise for you. I've decided not to do it. So what fun I had in getting a substitute page, a cooing serpent. That's what she is.
Oh, wow. Very good. And that's the end of that file. Now, we've got here one that says Nash Unpublished. What have we got in this one? I'll hand it back to you.
Let me look. Let's see here. Oh, this is one of the pieces that Andre Castellanos suggested he write either poems or stories for. This was for Ravel's Mother Goose Suite. And there's a prologue. The prologue begins, come one, come all, from village and town, and turn the hourglass upside down. See how the years, like grains of sand, sift backwards to a sweeter land. A land that disappeared long since, where every frog might be a prince. And every kitchen drudge, likewise, a spellbound princess in disguise. Just for a while, forget the date, forget that you were born too late. Too late to hear the mermaids singing and dragons through the heavens winging. Too late for simple tears and laughter and living happily ever after. Come join our game of make-believe. Wear a child's heart upon your sleeve. Pretend, with music soft and rhyme, that now is once upon a time.
Oh, and then you've got Hop o' My Thumb.
Yeah, and then we, I think, have other ones. We have something called the Tiny Golden Ones, which I don't know anything about. And then we have Beauty and the Beast and the Sleeping Beauty. My father's take on the Sleeping Beauty is a little different.
So these rhymes that we found here, Fairy Tales for Promenade, have they been performed?
No, not to my knowledge, they haven't. As far as I'm concerned, I have never seen a performance or heard a performance.
So it never got turned into a big public show or anything?
No,
like
I
that,
don't
no.
think so. I think Carnival was the one that went ahead. Carnival of the Animals.
So, now to celebrate his centenary, we give you, as performed by Kerry Shale in the manner of the poet himself, the world premiere, oh yes, of Ogden Nash's Sleeping Beauty.
The princess wakens, gazing on Prince Charming. Her sleepy yawn is utterly disarming. He takes her hand and helps her from the bed. He seeks a second kiss. She blushes red. Mon Dieu, monsieur, I needs must brush my teeth and change this gown. Ooh, there's nothing underneath. Soon she returns, divinely clad, although in fashion of 100 years ago, gold as the treasure of the Argonauts. He cries, I'll give a penny for your thoughts. The kiss that waked me, sir, although sublime, you might have saved for a more convenient time, not just as I dozed off, my dearest of dears, after tossing and turning for 100 years. He stammers, and she adds, I think perhaps that such a kiss was worth 1,000 naps. His eyes adore her, and his pulses race. I love you, says his jubilant embrace. To hide her joy, the princess won't attempt. It's all turned out exactly as I dreamt. I had a host of dreams. Some were unpleasant, but in my sweet ones, you were always present.
And did you dream so much, my dearest dear?
Oh, yes, at least 1,000 times a year. And good or bad, they were all fascinating. To tell them to you, I have long been waiting. Vivid they were, and real enough to touch. Now say again you love me, and how much?
Oh, more than any maid was ever loved. And when we're wed, each day it shall be proved. I'll listen before I open my morning mail to a century of your dreams in full detail.
The princess tenders him a loving cup, and he cries,
Musicians, ho! Strike up! Strike up!
The happy ending of the tale is written in music softer than a Persian kitten.
Music by Ravel, words by Ogden Nash, the performance of which we can only hope we did not make a hash. With words and music, no moving pictures, no scenery, here ends this Ogden Nash centenary.
Michael Rosen has been delving into the unknown cachery of Ogden Nashery. The reader was Kerry Shale and the producer Marilyn Harris.